Hello, Lauren Goodwin with BP. I have about 10 questions here, but I'll try to narrow it down.
I have 11 answers.
And not monopolize the whole conversation. This is a really great presentation, so thank you. If I could, though, just ask two questions, one practical and one financial. So having worked offshore for a lot of my career, it is very noisy. So from just a practical perspective, I'm having a really hard time wrapping my head around the hardware component and being able to hear my voice. I understand the noise cancellation, but I can't even get Siri to work on my iPhone. So what technology have you invested in your hardware to be able to hear my voice as I'm collaborating remotely on an offshore rig with my expert?
You call it a whisper chip, right?
Yeah. So we have 100 patents. One of the biggest and most compelling pieces of our hardware is, in fact, the noise cancellation, as well as the, voice detection. So we've spent a lot of time on that. We actually have another software release coming out, 8.03, 8.05, at the end of the month, which doubles down on that. It increases the volume by probably 3 decibels that it will work on. And then we also make a number of accessories that we manufacture ourselves. One of those is high-end noise protection. So go in your ear. And so that lets you hear the other person, it lets you hear you while you're having the conversation, two-way. So we've tested this in plants, on oil rigs. We're doing another one. James is doing one next week, in fact. So we can show you. We'd be happy to show you. And
Okay, yeah.
We've never had a problem with the noise or the voice detection. It's like our shining star.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I am just going to ask one more question on the financial side, but first I wanted to thank Andrew, I believe your name was. You used the example of she when you were talking, and I thought that was the first time I've heard it at this conference, so I wanted to call that out and thank you and acknowledge you for doing that. So my next component is on the investment side. So we could invest in robotics to replace some of the work that we're doing in the factories or in an offshore rig. In oil and gas, we're even talking about a completely unmanned rig. So at what price point or what complexity measure have you been able to convince your clients to invest in augmented reality versus robotics? How have your customers to choose AR over a robotic solution?
Yeah, I can go. I think autonomous robotics, we were talking about this before, requires connectomic AI, and mathematic-based AI isn't there yet. We can get into the whole deep learning debate later, but unless you hand program like KUKA robotic arms, for instance, to do a very precise set of maneuvers, and that programming takes time, if that is over and over and precise and over, then you'll be okay to install some robotics. But if it requires even a microscopic bit of adaptability, that is the one thing that humans have that robots and AI does not have today. So I feel we are a long, long ways away in the world of artificial intelligence to getting to any sort of human or biologic-based adaptability. And so, frankly, the robotic thing hasn't really come up with us because, again, we're going back to a use case that's so simple. It's just, I want to do a customer support video call.
It's interesting that you say it's a long way away. I think my background is in AI and robotics, so I'm very optimistic about where we can see this technology today. But let's assume it isn't a long way away. Let's say that you can do this today, right? Because there are certain aspects that you can replace your workforce with robotics. It's actually similar to another challenge that we've been seeing is customers that have employees in other countries, right? Where labor is much cheaper. And they say, do I really want to outfit this person that I'm paying $3 an hour with a $1,500 device? And the reasoning that they come up to is the fact that these workers make errors, right? And so that error reduction already pays for itself. But let's talk about robots for a second. Let's go back to the original question about robots. Robots, and this is the argument that I'm sure you've heard many times before, is that they require maintenance. Someone needs to be there to go fix something when something's wrong. And guess what? The easiest way that you can do that is by having the see what I see experience. And so the use case just changes. Instead of having someone who does the manufacturing, you now have someone who does the maintenance of the robot. So it becomes, instead of a manufacturing use case, it's more of a field service use case. So the technology just applies in different ways, but it really depends on where it fits in, right? Absolutely.
Hey guys, this is a great conversation. Akesh Elabarthi, AT&T. What sort of connectivity are you guys using with your devices in different verticals? Is this more of an LTE built into the device itself? Is it Bluetooth back to another device? Or using a Wi-Fi connection, depending maybe you're on like the manufacturing floor? What the most common network?
We only use AT&T MiFis. No, I'm just kidding.
I did not pay him for that.
No. All jokes aside, so the way that we've done a lot of our deployments is, it really depends on the use case, of course. But for manufacturing in the warehouses, all these devices that we work with are Wi-Fi connected, right? So they go straight back to the Wi-Fi, and from there, it goes into their internal cloud. Most of the deployments we do is on-prem, and that's due to security reasons, although we like to push for the cloud, absolutely, right? But a lot of what we do is on-prem, and so their Wi-Fi goes directly into their cloud. Now, when it's something more on the field service side of things, we either connect to a MiFi, as Sean was mentioning before, or we can connect into the phone over Bluetooth and then get the connection from there. But one of the other important things I would also put out there is the fact that we can do a lot of these operations offline. And so the way that we've sort of designed our stuff is that we can work in these offline scenarios. Because guess what? In a field service scenario, as Sean was mentioning, you're not always going to have that connectivity. And so what you really want to do is pull down all the information you're going to need for the rest of the day, go up to the top of that cell tower, get that information, and then as you're logging it, guess what? As you're producing that information about taking images, taking videos, you'll capture it, and then you'll store and forward it so that when you do have the internet connection, you'll push it back to the back end. Now, of course, this means that you won't be able to see what I see. And for that, those use cases, that's where the MiFi comes in, or the Bluetooth connection. But the answer is all of the above. Depends on the use case.
Yeah, there's no LTE chip in the hardware, in the wearables. Yeah, so it's all Bluetooth, Wi-Fi. I mean, we run Android 6 right now, so it's exactly the same. You go, My Controls, connect to Wi-Fi, select your Wi-Fi network, enter username or password, or I've tethered to my phone, right? I mean, we can tether to headphones, so that's really the way that we connect.
So I have a quick question, a more general one. Are there any major misconceptions you hear from your potential customers? And then could you explain what those are and how you've helped kind of provide knowledge and illuminate those misconceptions?
Oh, absolutely. One of the biggest ones is actually on the first slide of your presentation, which is, the HoloLens on the bottom, which the HoloLens itself is not the misconception because it can be used for technologies that are related to 2D data, but it's what it represents, right? When people think of augmented reality, they think of 3D objects. You think of, you're looking at that engine, you see that screw coming off and like some sort of Iron Man style projection of what you're supposed to be seeing, and then these engineers are going to do exactly that motion, and then the computer will recognize that that's happened, and then they'll go on to the next step, right? It's great in concept, but the data is just not there. And so the misconception is that AR is going to be working with new types of data. And so the solution is really just that what we do is we tie into the data that already exists. Because guess what? That data, it has been cultivated for decades. It's useful information. You don't want to just throw that away. In fact, you don't want to spend, as you said, 30,000 PDFs. The last thing you want to do is try to digitize that into a 3D format, right? What you really just want to do is show that 2D data. And so that's probably one of the biggest misconceptions.
Yeah, I mean, it's the bridge concept, right? Like, we're not there yet. We will be eventually, but we need a bridge to go from here to there. So, yeah.
Thank you. And we have a question over here.
Yes, Nancy Givens, DuPont. So I'm coming from a little bit different perspective. I'm coming from the manufacturing floor, and my question is, can it be used as a hands-free data input device? You know, to have an operator that is weighing materials to go into a batch of a specialty chemical, process and have them, look at a barcode, confirm that it's the right material, put it on a weigh scale, weigh out the right material, capture either verbally or visually through video, the amount, have that, go into a back-end database that then can be sucked into, say, the control system, and then have them progress. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, I mean, we would classify that under the workflow use case, the big bucket.
Okay.
So remote mentor, workflow, IoT visualization, and document viewer. That's total workflow. So these guys have that. It's the dictation on ours doesn't require a cloud connection. It can happen all locally, 10 languages, any dialect, no training. You just put it on and it works. And so you can talk about the software side, yeah.
Sure. I mean, I'm a lover of technology. And so what I would say is, looking at that workflow, you could QR code scan, or sorry, just a barcode scan, right? And then get the input that way. Or, better yet, when it comes to the scale, have that be connected, have that be part of your IoT. And have it so that as it's weighing it, you can then say confirm on the device. So that way the user, there's no mistranslation, right? Because one of the biggest challenges that we've seen is when companies try to take data that's out there in the world and have the user transcribe it into the device. Not just because it might be difficult for that particular device, but also because the human is a source of error. And so the fewer steps that you can have, the safer it is.
Right, and I also had a follow-up question. I really liked your discussion of the assembly of panels and wiring and whatnot. And do you actually have the software that you can, like, say, feed a set of drawings or a termination schedule into? And it actually, so you have the softwares that support the use case?
That's right. So what we do is, the way our software is lined out is it ties into the various backends, right, and pulls from these, which we've worked with a whole bunch of different types, whether it be different databases of XY coordinates or specific MES, right? We pull that data and then we display it on the device. So the way that it's lined out, our software is a platform, but there's 5% of it that's specific to each customer. And so that 5% is the part that would be tailored to a specific use case like wire harness. Now, fortunately, a lot of wire harness companies use the same backend, and so we can reuse a lot of that.
Question over here.
Yeah, Stefan Miksch from ARC. I'm following this whole trend and topic about augmented reality and basically thinking about remote maintenance and maintenance support remotely. You know, we live in a globalized world, so probably we have a United States OEM selling a machine to probably Thailand or Vietnam. So you're providing, or the OEM wants to provide a remote maintenance service, and I think of the language barrier now. There might be an operator at the machine fails, and he contacts the service provider, the OEM in the United States, who is the expert, but he doesn't speak English at all. So the United States service guy doesn't speak Thailandish or whatever. So how can this be overcome by augmented reality? Because in the end, then you would have said, okay, we have to send this service guy to Thailand anyway because they can communicate with each other. Is there a solution for that?
Do you want to answer that, or I could go ahead? I mean, I think it might be a software solution.
I mean, how do you do it? How would you do it today in a phone call?
Well, let me propose you this, right? So one way you could do it is transcription. So as they're speaking, one person on one side, right? This doesn't exist today in our software, just saying it's a possibility. But during the video call, as they're talking, transcribe it into text, translate it, send it over. So that even if it's not real-time communication, right, you can at least have that text going in real time. Now, as technology progresses and we have things like the babblefish in your ear, right? So what we'll do is, as they're speaking in real time, we'll transcribe it into the language, and then we'll have the robotic voice of some English accent that says, this is what the other person said, right? And so that is, I think, where the technology is going. We haven't had any customers that have ran into that specific issue yet, but as we do, I'm sure that's something that we'll explore.
Yeah, it hasn't come up for us yet either. But yeah, I think it's roadmap for industry, AI side.
Great. We have a question over here.
Good morning, Mark Schreffler with Eli Lilly Pharmaceuticals. You know, we can think of use cases We can find devices on the market. We can figure out how to connect them. The thing that I see my business partners struggling with, and as an IT professional, I've got to help them, is how do you bridge between all these back-end applications and repositories of information we have today to the devices themselves, and deliver that content? Are there models or archetypes that are proven to be more successful than others? Because I'm not going to pop a 1024 by 768 screen with all these little minute mouse controls up in front of a technician who's out in the field. What are you guys seeing in that regard?
I think that's a software question, so I'll take that one. So when it comes to connecting to different backends, it's a two-part challenge. Because you come from an IT background, one of the other challenges I imagine you must face is having to manage all these devices, right? But we'll get into that in a moment. When it comes to connecting into these various backends, the easiest way that we've seen is if it has a REST interface, if it has any type of API that we can access, like whether it be, I don't know, ThingWorks or Siemens, it doesn't matter what it is. If it has an API that we can access, our API also has a REST interface, and you just need to write that connector. And so it's super easy to sort of push that data. Now, when it comes to the question of that particular type of data, so you're talking about this 1024 PDF, right? This huge image. The last thing you want to do is necessarily show it on the device. Now, there are several solutions for that. You could use something like the RealWear device, where you can pan and zoom with your head, zoom in, right, and you get that image. There are also concepts like the HoloLens, that's where it would be useful, right? Because you have that PDF, now it's floating out in space. And so now you can see the entire PDF right there in front of you. And so when it comes to managing a lot of devices, though, I think that is one of the biggest challenges for IT. The biggest challenge is they look at this and they say, okay, 1 or 2 devices, great. The pilot, we saw 30% increase in efficiency. That sounds fantastic. How do we get it to 10,000 devices, right? That sounds like a nightmare. Well, the answer is these, just as Sean said, they're just Android devices. They're just like cell phones. And in fact, we're working with companies today. I'm the director of partnerships, so this, again, is close to me. We're working with companies like AirWatch and Mobile Iron today so that it's the same MDMs that you guys are using today, and all of these devices, they'll just be like another cell phone that goes on the network. And so that's the goal of when it comes to sort of scaling this technology up.
Yeah, I would all the MDM, we've got that in our own cloud too. So the one word I would say, well, 2 words, systems integrators, SIs, is how we'd solve that right now today. I don't think the industry is quite there yet. It's like iPhone 09, right? And so as that industry gets larger, you'll start to have new entrants, and then they'll start to solve those as software providers. So that's how you get 5,000 MarTech apps, right? So it'll just take some time.
Great. We have another question down here.
Yep, 2 quick questions. Dave Zwalla with Dow Chemical. The first one is, we talked about walking around with a tablet. So if you're moving a tablet to glasses, doing a lot of work adapting those, do we have to completely rewrite the applications that we already have? If say they're HTML, we have some on barcode guns. And then the second thing is have you done any applications with OCR, or optical character recognition?
So we just launched a new developer website last week. And so you can take any Android application out of the Google Play Store, drag and drop that APK onto our device, and it'll work. Any word in there, we pick that up, and you can just say it. So I've installed Spotify, Netflix. One of our guys watched Netflix on a flight back from CES. I don't know, okay. It's not the greatest user experience, so what software developers will have to do is they'll get in there and they'll go, okay, I just need to write some voice commands, and then there might be some scrolling issues or the screen size, and so I want to just move that to a different screen. So it's mainly UX based, and I want to add, there's an icon with no text label, so we need to add a text label so I can say it instead of tap it. Yeah, that's number 1. The other one was OCR, if you want to take that.
Sure. Actually, I'll talk about that first one for a moment as well. But this is one case where I think you're a little more optimistic than I am. One analogy I like to talk about with these wearable devices is they're a lot like cell phones when they first came out, right? And so what people used to do is they would take these desktop websites and put them on your cell phone. But guess what? When you do that, it really doesn't work. And so what has happened is you've created these mobile applications, these mobile websites, mobile versions of everything. And so in the same manner, you're going to have the same thing with the wearable devices. You're going to have the wearable version. So sorry to say it, but in most cases, the ability to just take what you've created and put it into the same interface or this new interface, unfortunately, it doesn't work. It will take you maybe 50% of the way there, but if you really want to use the technology for what it is, you'll want to create that new interface. As for OCR, I did a lot of R&D, and as part of that, we looked into OCR. It works, but you really have to find a use case that's good for it, right? At that point, you're trying to push the technology to a point where it may or may not work. And if you look at your company, there are going to be low-hanging fruits. And these are the places that you want to start with a technology like this. You don't want to say, you know, what's the most obscure thing that I can think of? And guess what? I think this technology can solve it because this technology is magical. Well, guess what? The technology is magical, and it exists today, and it can solve problems, but the problems that it should solve are the easiest ones. And so, again, going back to hands-free access of information or see what I see. If those can solve your problems, there's no reason to look any further and try to adapt it to another thing.
We have a question back here.
Yes, my name is Rodney James from Duke Energy. Can you both speak again a little bit more about those devices? I know you said when you were answering another question about it's just another Android device on the network. But in a lot of our discussions that we've been having with our IT department, that's the number one thing that scares them, is that it's just another cellular, or it's another Android device, can be an iOS platform device. So can you talk about some of those discussions on using something like AirWatch or some type of MDM that makes a trusted hardware device on a network?
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we've integrated with Mobile Iron, AirWatch. We have our own RealWear cloud where you can provision both the applications and the devices and the users. So we can do that today. I mean, we go through the IT checklists, right, and the spreadsheets, and we've got to fill all those out. So I think it would come down to the specifics of your company versus another company, and then obviously industry by industry, it's a little bit different. Energy, utilities, oil and gas, that's sort of a different situation than an HVAC company, right? Or manufacturing, you got different security requirements. Pharma is another one. We have a partner who's like basically custom fit their entire solution just around the security requirements of pharmaceuticals. And so they've gone really, really far beyond. And so I think it just comes down to what your specific requirements are, and then we can work through that list, and if we need to do a software update or whatever the case may be, we can do that. At the end of the day, if you're an aerospace company and you've said we don't believe that Android can be a secure operating system, and we're only Windows and it's full stop, whether that's true or not, then that's just the way of the world, I guess. But we'll work with our customers. So yeah, I think it's just part of the process, right? Like POC, pilot, deployment, and the deployment phase is where you get into the IT checklist and you get it running in production and real people in real world situations. So
you're absolutely right. It's about working with the customer, right? I think it's a psychological thing. IT loves to say no, right? And then they'll say no again. And then maybe the third time they'll say, all right, fine, but it has to follow these rules. And the thing is that because it's a new technology, it doesn't necessarily fit into anywhere in their playbook. But as we work with these IT groups, as we introduce the devices as cell phones and basically say, you know what, it's running the same platform. It's running Android Marshmallow. It has the same Wi-Fi chip. It has the same Bluetooth. You know what, it's just a different form factor. That's where the conversation begins. And then from there, absolutely, we'll answer any security questions that they may have. We'll go through any audits. And it's really just about making sure that we work closely with the IT group. And so, in fact, when we work with customers, we'll work with several different groups. But the one that we'll work absolutely closest with is IT, because right now that is the biggest hurdle.
Question down here.
Hi, it's Jim from Schneider Electric. Today's question is, if we're creating new content as a result of hearing about AR, what recommendations do you have about making content richer and more AR ready so that when we do take the plunge, we don't regret missing out on the opportunity to make the incremental investments along the way to become AR ready with our content?
Well, I would say you should invest into the Skylight platform, but it's not a sales pitch. So, but the reason I say that is because what you want to work with are companies that can work with the data that you have today, as well as the data you'll have tomorrow. So instead of a lot of these one-off applications, I won't name any competitors, where they will either work with the data you have today, or they'll say, you know what, we'll work so that you have a solution in 5 years. Right? You want to work with a company that has a solution using the data that you have today and get the low-hanging fruit, as I was talking about, as well as work with you so that in 5 years you can get that solution. And so to answer your particular question about that, the data and how to construct it in such a way that it will last, what I would say is make sure that, one, it has tiebacks into the data you have today, right? And second, make it context aware as much as possible. But you want to follow up on that question?
You all set?
Yeah, I kind of go back to the bridge thing, which is we've got to get all the component pieces together first and just get out of the box with just a screen that you put an inch from the eye before we can start adding new content, right? So it's we have different executives that have come from the company. One of them is from Mataio, which is Apple's AR kit. So we have people from that group that is in here. And so one of the things that I was up late one night having a conversation about is like, take Skype, for instance. When you first think about Skype in a new augmented reality paradigm, you put on glasses, right? Like glasses like this, and that's all it is. And then you look up at the wall, and it's just a flat 2D Skype screen like you would have on your computer or your phone. And then you start thinking about, okay, now content, how would that change? Well, maybe the person walks out from the wall, and I'm talking to the person as a 3D hologram, right? So, but we need to get someone wearing this today to even get Skype up on the wall before we can have them walk out of the wall. So I guess the short answer that I would say first is, let's just get to the point where we have 100 million industrial workers wearing a computer on their head before we worry about redoing a ton of different content. And as you get 5, 10, 50, 100, 3,000 people, that's when you start to say, let's just ask them and see, okay, where's this breaking down? What do we need to add? What type of content would be better for you? Is just a PDF great, or do you want something more dynamic? But then again, you're back into a different sort of headset, which is, I'm back to HoloLens, which takes away situational awareness. In an industrial environment, if you take away my peripheral vision, there's a reason our thing comes here and below the line of sight, very specifically is how we tell people to wear it, is because you need this peripheral vision. So if all of a sudden you have 100 million industrial workers and they're looking at 3D content and it's covering their entire field of view, that's very dangerous. So I would almost say, don't worry about it yet. You got to let this stuff shake out a little bit first, and we're fine with PDFs.
That said, if you have the money, it doesn't hurt to do a little bit of research and see what works for you, right? So, it's never too early to get started in something exciting as 3D data, I think.
Question over here.
Yes, good morning. Brian Clemens, Dow Chemical. Probably more a question for Sean. Where are you today, and how does your roadmap look for getting into as many areas in industry as possible, as far as area classification, explosion proof, those kind of things?
So we're producing thousands off the line every quarter. We push production unit in October, November. So we've been doing that. We're certified to ship in 35 countries worldwide, type approval. End of June, we will have our first 400 units for intrinsically safe. It's the exact same form factor, exact same software. The only difference is it's colored red and it's 50 grams heavier. If you know anything about intrinsically safe, you know how difficult that is. ATEX Zone 1, Class 1, Div 1. We've bought out the global supply of, I'm not going to name the number of batteries, but the wearable batteries for the next 3 years, we've checked. And we feel very strongly about our position in the intrinsically safe wearable category for the foreseeable future. So that's our big roadmap item. we'll have 2 production-grade products rolling off the line middle of 2018. And we're taking pre-orders on that via our website now. No more sales pitch. Thank you. Sorry. Bye.
What are we looking at for time?
10 minutes.
10 minutes? All right. Any other questions? Okay.
Can I make a shameless pitch?
Yeah, shameless pitch. Let's hear it.
My name's Sal Spada from ARC, and I think there was a question here on the robotics and the kind of the development of robotics and some of the applications. I want to bring to your attention, I'm not sure who it was that asked the question, but at 4 p.m. today we have a session called Smart Logistics, Smart Machine Logistics, and the focus of that particular session is really on autonomous mobile robotics used in the warehousing applications using pretty much natural feature recognitions for many of the warehousing and distribution centers. So some of the companies we have in there, one is Locus Robotics, which is a relatively new startup, but is kind of basically trying to supplant the market for what Kiva left. Kiva is the acquisition that Amazon made for their warehousing, and they no longer supply into the market. So there's been kind of a vacuum for this type of technology to infiltrate the market. So I really highly recommend you go to this, because some of these guys are the early entrants into the market to try to fill that vacuum. So, and then you get a sense of where the robotics technology is today in terms of not being so programmed, but actually adaptable and capable of adjusting to many different types of environments. Okay?
Okay. If there are no more questions, I'd like to thank everyone here for attending.
I have a question, if I may.
Yeah,
I'd like to
go for
ask everybody here, since we've had this discussion about all these devices, the different use cases. You've seen several different particular use cases. And so one question I have to you guys as a show of hands is whether or not, off the top of your head today, you can think of a low-hanging fruit at your company. And so I guess that's my question to you is, after what you've seen today, do you think this technology is something that you could use right now?
Okay.
I see a lot of head nodding, like, okay, all right. No, it's great to hear. And so that is, I think, that's why we're here today, right? To show that this technology is, in fact, being used today, and that there are applications that, guess what, you could turn back right now and get this implemented and already see those benefits. And using this type of technology, it's the step in the door, or it's the foot in the door, right? This is what will prepare you, as Jim was talking about, for the technologies ahead, right? And so this, just want to plant the seed in your head that this is technology that is being used today and is going to be ready for the future as well.
Great. So I'd like to thank everyone for attending. I'd also like to thank Andrew and Sean for their great presentations and their great answers. I think there's still 10 more minutes in this session, so we'll be here to answer any one-on-one questions you might have. Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your sessions, guys.